Well, former Wisconsin governor and U.S. Senator Fighting Bob LaFollette is credited with launching the progressive movement in Wisconsin.
But a recent Marquette Law School poll found that just 19% of Wisconsinites identify themselves as progressives today, and many don't even know what the term means. So what is happening right now in Wisconsin? It's a question explored in this month's issue of Madison Magazine by Dee Hall. She is the managing editor of the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism. And in this month's issue of Madison Magazine, there it is, she poses the question, are progressive politics on the comeback in Wisconsin?
Dee, welcome to Live at 4.
Hi, Dee.
Thanks
nice
for
to
having
see
me.
you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Let's define progressive. What is it? What does it mean?
Well, that is a really good question, and that's one of the biggest challenges to progressivism is because there's a lot of debate about exactly what it means. Generally speaking, I think people who are progressive believe in the government as a vehicle for positive change. Government can protect people, might be a great equalizer, a problem solver. And you can contrast that, of course, with people who would consider themselves to be small government people, conservatives, who believe that the government should have a limited role in most instances.
Despite our progressive heritage, Republican candidates traditionally do very well in Wisconsin. We have a Republican-controlled legislature and a Republican governor. So what is the evidence, or is there evidence, that progressives are making a comeback?
Well, it depends on where you are. Madison, for example, is sort of an epicenter of progressivism, and we still have many people on the city council, for example, members of the county board. Mayor Paul Soglin definitely calls himself a progressive. So we do have some strong support here, but there is a structural problem that Democrats/progressives have in Wisconsin, and some of it revolves around the redistricting that took place after the last census. Since then, even though more Democrats came out, for example, in the 2012 election, more Republicans were elected to the state assembly. And that's because the districts were formed in a way that was favorable toward Republicans. And so there is that aspect too. So yes, we do have a Republican governor. Clearly the legislature is dominated by Republicans, but we also have, we've elected Tammy Baldwin to statewide office. President Obama won here back in his last election. So, it's a kind of, some people have described it as somewhat of a schizophrenic political scene.
Mm-hmm. But we have to admit that here in Dane County, we are sort of an island from the rest of the state in terms of politics.
Well, yes, I would say so. I think it's definitely the case that during the Act 10 protests, which were sort of the lead of the story that I wrote, there was this sense here in Madison that somehow the progressive movement was sort of reinvigorated with all of these protests. We had 100,000 people at the Capitol, and there was a huge recall movement, and then it just sort of fizzled out because the energy that we saw, the feelings that were being expressed here in Madison just were not being expressed statewide.
Tomorrow is the 5-year anniversary of the signing of the Act 10 legislation. and you explained so well in the article that it was a high point for progressives, and then in 2012 it sort of all slipped away, as you said. But have you been able to define why that happened?
I think part of it is one aspect, according to one of the experts that I talked to, one aspect is that Act 10 itself greatly weakened the groups, primarily labor unions, who support progressives and Democrats. And so the act itself, once it passed, really cut the legs out from underneath a big part of the Democratic support in this state, political Democratic support. And so that's a big factor, I think, that happened. Then there was just people being demoralized. There was all this effort put into this, encampment at the Capitol and all of these protests, and then they seemed to be for nothing at the end. So I think there was that aspect as well.
But you conclude that progressivism is coming back.
Well, not exactly that there are some signs of life, depending on where you look. I think there are some folks that I talk to people on the left and the right and sort of in the middle. And the notion is there may be, as there often is, a pendulum swing. We've seen a lot of conservative policies go forward and be adopted. There could be a pendulum swing back toward more moderate or liberal policies. You can see that, on the national level with the Democratic campaign for president.
It always seems to go that way, doesn't it? Back and forth.
Yes.
Well, great reading, and you can read more about Dee's story in this month's edition of Madison Magazine, now on sale. Dee, thanks for being with us.
It's also posted online, by the way. Nice to see you, Dee.
Good to see you too. Thanks.